Hello again and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd and we're glad you could join us for another hour of answering those gardening questions. Once again, we have started answering your phone-in questions too, so if you'd like to get some answers, dial 1-800-676-5446. Those great master gardeners will be happy to help you. And if you would still like to submit a question or a picture for a future show, our email address is byf@unl.edu. We do need to know where you live, and you can tell us as much information as you can about your question. That will help us answer it. You can keep up with Backyard Farmer during the week on our Facebook page. You can watch those past shows and featured content on our YouTube channel. As always, we're going to start with samples, and Dennis, you've brought bats in your belfry.
Right. Well, it's July, and we always say, let them fly till July. Well, it's July as of today, so this is when you can start to exclude them, and you can do it several ways. You can use the bat cone, not bat cave, the bat cone. This is if they're going in and out in a corner. Or this other one, that's if there's a small hole, and this way they go out but can't come back in, even the young of the year. Or if you have a slit, you can just hang monophilic type of netting with weights, bring it out with a 1x2 from the wall of the house. They'll come out but can't get back. Leave this for about 2 or 3 weeks to the middle of July, and then caulk the holes, and you have excluded your bats.
As easy as that.
As easy as that.
Unless you have like a 4-story house.
Well, then you just need a bigger ladder.
Thanks.
Or Kim will come with a bigger ladder.
Exactly. I'll just Spider-Man up.
Yep.
All right.
Batman, not Spider-Man.
That too. All right. Kyle, what do you have today?
I have the base of what was a very poor-looking tomato plant.
So I bet it looks poorer now.
Yes, it's much poorer out of the soil and just being in a bag for a couple of days. But you know, a lot of tomatoes out there are finally starting to grow. I know mine have been taking off, even have a few nice little fruits on them. Then there's few things sadder when you walk out and you notice that entire tomato plant has wilted. And there are a few different causes for that. Maybe it could be the heat, lack of water, things like that. But we also have some diseases that cause these wilts to occur. And so this is a tomato that came in with Fusarium wilt. And so Fusarium wilt often has this nice kind of dark, kind of chocolate brown to black discoloration towards the base. That's one of the entry points for the fungus. But then if you split it open, you can see, let's see, all right. We have all of that discoloration of the vascular system as well. And so that's what's actually causing the wilt to occur, is we have the fungus has kind of gummed up the vascular system, and it's not able to do the water transport that one would hope. Now, like I said, there are multiple wilts. There's Fusarium wilt, there's Verticillium wilt. We also have some bacterial wilts that occur. For the most part, control on them is pretty much all the same. Look for a resistant variety, and you're probably going to have to remove the plant as well. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of good chemical controls. Again, it's something in the soil. It's taken over the entire plant. So best thing to do is make a note of it. And next year, try to come back with a resistant variety. There are some varieties that have very good resistance to Fusarium wilt, but also crop rotation is going to be one of your best friends as well. So making sure, if you can, to rotate where we have those tomatoes, so we're not selecting for that fungus in the soil year after year after year.
Excellent. Thank you, Kyle. And speaking of tomatoes, Sarah.
Yeah, I'm keeping up the tomato theme here on this side of the table tonight. And so I just wanted to say a couple of words about herbicide damage, because we're still, this is a prime season for us to get lots of questions about herbicide damage in the vegetable garden. And so here I have a tomato. You see these leaves, which are very small and stunted as compared to what they normally should be. If you look really closely at these leaves, you can see that the veins, in many cases, have started to go parallel with the main vein, running all toward the tip of the leaf. But the leaves are distorted. They're very, very small. In some instances, you might find the leaves are kind of cupped or curled. But those are all classic signs of herbicide damage compared to this leaf, which is a normal leaf on a tomato. Now, granted, this is new growth at the tip. This is an older leaf, so new growth leaves would be smaller, but look how well developed that leaf is. Now, when we talk to homeowners about herbicide damage in their vegetable garden, oftentimes one of the first things they'll say is, well, it can't be herbicide damage because I've got a plant right next to it that's not showing any symptoms. These two plants were about 2 feet apart from each other. So, excuse me, it's not uncommon to see chemical move in the air in a certain way that some plants are affected and others are not. So what do you do with this plant? Well, typically what will happen with tomatoes is the plants will be stunted for a while, but eventually they will start to grow out of it. Now, it's obviously that these chemicals were not meant to be used on vegetable plants, so they're not labeled for vegetables. It's up to you to decide if it's safe to harvest from these plants. Typically, any flowers that are present when the herbicide drift occurs will usually abort or fall. By the time the plant starts growing again, a good portion of the herbicide is gone and the plant will start to set fruits normally. So it's kind of up to you to decide if you want to harvest from these plants or if you want to pull them out and start over or just rely on non-affected plants, okay? But herbicide damage like this is very, very common in our vegetable gardens in the summertime.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Unfortunately, for all of us who are looking forward to that BLT.
Yes.
All right, Dennis, you get the first round of critter questions. Okay. So this first one, she says, didn't know frogs came in ivory, and better yet, how did she get into the container? So this is in a container, this little dude.
Okay. Well, this is a native tree frog. Mm-hmm. So they can easily get in any container if it was outside or even outside at a nursery or where you purchased the ivy, or if it's outside naturally, they'll just be there. They're just eating insects. That's the native Cope's gray tree frog.
All right.
And they like any plant, especially where there's moisture. So if you water a lot, they like it a lot.
Nice. So your next question, he actually thinks it's a Cope's gray tree frog. Found him looking through a plum thicket west of Hastings by about 10 miles, just a little bit larger than a thumbnail.
Yep, that's newly metamorphed last year. And again, it's in the green phase, but it's a Cope's gray tree frog. And it's interesting, Hastings, because originally they were just in the eastern quarter of the state, but we have found them as far as North Platte now. So what they're doing because of fire suppression, they're moving along the Platte River Valley because of all the trees.
Nice. All right, your next one, he simply says, what species is this? It was up by Nebraska Crossing.
Okay, that is Steria Decay, Decay's brown snake. That's a full-grown, I believe, female, and she may be gravid. They have live young. They're real tiny, but they don't get much bigger than a foot, maybe 18 inches for a real big one. And they eat slugs, and they put their small head into land snails and pull the land snails out. So they're beneficial, can't hurt a thing. Their teeth are microscopic and made for eating escargot.
Perfect. Your next one, this is an Ida Grove, Iowa viewer. And this was taken actually 20 miles east of Iowa City in eastern Iowa. So pastures, the snake looked long. They thought about 4 feet. No interaction except they took the picture.
Yeah, so that's a fox snake. And it looks like a western fox snake, but not seeing enough detail. And as far east as it could be a different fox, but it's definitely a fox snake. So whether it's the native western or the counterpart, the eastern, I would have to get a different picture, but it could be either from that location. Excellent.
And your final one here is in Saunders County. Can you identify this one? Is it dangerous? Didn't seem to be afraid of people.
Okay.
This is not killed.
This is another fox snake. This one was hard to identify. In fact, when I looked at these next to each other, I thought they were the same snake, but it's definitely a fox snake. And this would be a western one. They're not dangerous to anything but rodents. So, and the reason we call it a fox snake is that all snakes have a musk that's an odor to defense themselves. And people think that the odor that this snake puts out smells like a fox. They don't go after fox, they only go after small rodents. Yeah, and all snakes have a different smell. Garter snakes have a really bad smell. But copperheads, I love the smell of copperheads. if someone can make cologne of copperhead musk, I wear it every day.
You know, you always make the show really interesting.
Thank you.
All right, Kyle, follow that one with this one.
Yeah, I'll try.
This is a Tilden viewer. She sent us pictures of a potato. Came on suddenly. The stems have brown or rust-colored spots. I think we have 2 pictures on this one. Some leaves are dying. They water overhead.
Yeah, and so that watering overhead is never something we want to do in our garden if we can avoid it. Really helps spread a lot of diseases, especially this one. And so I think that this is aerial stem blight of potatoes, caused by a few different bacteria. There's a Decay bacteria, also a pectobacterium. But this same pathogen can also cause blackleg on potatoes, and so that's kind of a black rot at the base of the stem, and it can also cause a soft rot of the tuber itself. And we can kind of tell that this is bacterial if we look at this picture. We can see there's kind of slimy. It looks a little bit slimy, a little bit of water soaking as well, and that's very common with a lot of our bacterial diseases. Unfortunately, we don't have good chemical controls for bacterial diseases. There is some research out there that copper may slow it down, but once you're starting to see symptoms like this, there's probably not a whole lot that you can do. So I would try to remove these plants as soon as you can, and you'll also want to remove the tubers from this plant as well. And then when it comes time to harvest, in case that we do have some of that bacterial disease on any of the tubers, we want to make sure that we're harvesting at the right temperature, so about 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and then trying to dry those tubers out fairly quickly. The quicker we can get them dry, the less chance we have for that bacteria to enter the tuber and cause more rot issues.
All right, your next one also, I'm sure this one smells. This is in Bennington. Onions that are getting rotten at the roots. He's grown plants for 40 years and he's never seen this.
No, I guess there's a first time for everything, and it's as I've encountered this before, and it smells horrid. But it brings in a lot of people if you're out at a farmer's market event or something like that. But this is Fusarium basil rot of onions. There's a few different basil rots that the onions can get, but Fusarium is one of the main ones that will actually attack the roots and cause the roots to rot off. The fungus actually infects earlier in the season, but we don't really see any symptoms until those roots have rotted off, and then then it starts to get into the onion itself. Again, not a whole lot that we can do for this. Best thing to do is rotation, but you don't want to be rotating away for only a year or two. If you can, to control a lot of our Fusarium diseases, we want to rotate away from that crop for about 4 to 5 years. Fusariums form some long-lasting survival spores that can survive in the soil for quite some time. So go away from that site for about 4 to 5 years if you can, and you should not have an issue. Otherwise, there are always resistant varieties to look into as well.
All right, and you have one final one. This is Clarkson. He's had this problem before. A fungicide helped. The leaves are small, curled, the fruit is deformed. It is affecting all of his tomatoes.
Yeah, so I think the fact that the fungicide was helping is kind of a red herring in this case. Maybe should grab Sarah's sample again. But small deformed leaves and then deformed fruit is normally a sign of some sort of herbicide injury, especially if it's affecting all of the tomatoes right about the same time. Really good chance that it is a herbicide issue that you're dealing with. Potential for viruses, but again, with that deformed fruit, normally that's a herbicide issue.
All right, thank you, Kyle. All right, Sarah, your first one is fun. It comes to us from Omaha, sent to us from Scotts Bluff. What is this and what causes it?
So this is a condition called fasciation, and we can see it in a lot of different types of plants. But so at the tip of a stem of a plant, there is a small number of cells that are dividing and causing the growth on that stem. Typically in a normally dividing stem, the cells, the new cells are arranged in a circular fashion, so you get usually a round-shaped stem. In the case of fasciation, there's a mutation that happens in the cells, and the new cells are started to lay down in a flat vertical fashion. So you end up with these really deformed stems that are flat, that may have lots of buds along the length of the stem. So it's just kind of a mutation that occurred in the plant. Now it's not really dangerous or anything. A crested celosia is actually a fasciated plant that we grow ornamentally. So, and there are some other plants like that too. So typically what you would do when you see this occurring is just, admire it for a little while and then prune it out, let it go.
Thanks, Sarah. Your next one, this is a Bellevue viewer, wonders what in the world is going on with the dwarf Alberta spruce.
Yeah, it kind of looks like it's growing a hair, a wild hairdo or something, but this is another mutation. So dwarf Alberta spruce itself occurred as a sport off of Colorado spruce. And so some plantsmen at some time found this really odd growth in this spruce that had these really short inner nodes and very tiny little needle-like leaves. And they decided to take some cuttings and start propagating it. And it was sold, and it's still in the nursery trade as dwarf Alberta spruce. Mm-hmm. This plant is reverting back to the original genetic code and physical appearance of that original spruce. So this is a mutation. So the thing about this is that mutated section is going to be very vigorous, and there's a good chance that this could just expand and grow really large and overtake the dwarf Alberta spruce form itself. So here again, you're probably going to want to prune this out so it doesn't ruin the shape and structure of this plant.
All right, and you have one final question, and this is the reddish color on the top of their blue spruce. What are these?
Yeah, so these are immature cones.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we miss things like this in our landscapes if we're not paying attention and looking at plants early in the spring. But these are the immature cones that would have been pollinated this year that would now start to develop into mature cones and have viable seeds.
Perfect. Thank you, Sarah. Well, we have received numerous questions this year dealing with, will my tree survive? Unfortunately, many times the answer to that question is no, but we thought we'd try to help you with some clues that point to either a dying tree or a dangerous situation. Here's Extension Educator John Fesh to tell us more.
One of the most common questions that we get when you're dealing with medium-sized trees or trees that have a sentimental value is, hey, I really like this tree, can I keep it? Is it stable in the landscape? Well, we can answer that question by giving it 3 considerations. The first one is, what could it possibly fall on? We always think safety first. Those are called targets, and they're items like this fence, and they're also people that are associated with the items. A patio also comes to mind. The second consideration are the site considerations, the site conditions. Are we looking at lots of concrete that cover the roots, or is it a big uninterrupted space that allows water to percolate down and a lot of oxygen exchange and good root growth? And then when you look at the third thing, those are defects that are in the tree. And there are a multitude of defects, from cracks to basal injuries to codominant leaders, to also crown indications. Now the ash tree behind me is starting to show a little bit of sign of what we've talked about on Backyard Farmer a lot, the emerald ash borer. And so it should be a red flag that that's something to consider, and you'll probably need some assistance in trying to figure out if that's exactly what we've got going. And then once we look at all the different defects, you put all these 3 things together, the site, the targets, and then each of those defects, and how do we get those things assimilated in kind of a complex question. You're probably going to need some assistance. That assistance can come from a certified arborist. Fortunately, here in Nebraska, we have 2 organizations that certify arborists. The first one is the International Society of Arboriculture, and this is an organization that certifies individual people, not the tree service that they work for. And then the other one is the Nebraska Arborist Association. And we, as professionals with the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, work with these organizations to help train the members so that they can give good service to the customers that they serve. As you're viewing this, you might be wondering, hey, what can I do as a property owner? Hey, I'm not a tree professional, what can I do? The first thing is to be observant. and look at the normal versus the abnormal. And if something looks a little askew, then the best thing you do is take some photos of the abnormal and the normal and send those photos to your local extension educator. They'll be able to look at them, share them among the other arborists and the other horticulturists, and come to a real conclusion that something might be going on here and you're following down the right road.
These are just a few of the things you should be looking for when it comes to your trees. And as John said, your local extension educator, professional arborist can help you decide if that tree needs tender, loving care or it's time to try something else. All right, Dennis, your next set of questions. Bats in the basement. This time, found a bat. Your first one is found a bat in a sticky trap on the floor. Why would it be on the floor? Was it sick? How to tell if there are more and how to keep them from getting in.
Okay, this is the red bat, which is not the one we usually find indoors, but it can get indoors. Most bats are in attics, but they can get in any part of the home. This bat is noted lots of times to be lower in areas because it's the only bat that has more than one young. Sometimes they have 4 young. And if you're a flying little bat and you have 4 little babies with you, you're on the floor.
Okay.
And so it could be that. But it's a common, somewhat common bat, but it usually doesn't get in homes, but it probably found its way in accidentally.
All right, your next one is also bats. They've increased in numbers. Are they contributing anything useful for the garden? And is there any danger from droppings or rabies, or do they just let them be?
Well, if you can let them be is the best thing. Of course, yes, rabies is pretty severe if you get it, but it's very uncommon in bats, less than 10%. They do eat a lot of flying insects, and their guano outside in the soil is actually used as a fertilizer. You don't want it in the house. And so if this is outdoors, I would let them be. If it's indoors, I would go by what we talked about in the beginning to exclude them.
All right, and your next 2 pictures are, this is Gurley, Nebraska. She has something going on in her lawn, and this is one of the pictures, and I think your second one here is a little bit closer.
Yeah. It looks like moles. Moles eat earthworms, and usually when they're going through the soil, eating the earthworms, they uproot the grass. They don't eat the grass roots, but they push the grass up and the grass roots rip. And so as long as it's raining, you don't see the damage. As soon as it starts getting dry, you get these brown, wiggly mole runs. And it was a little hard to see, but it does look like moles were there eating a lot of earthworms, and then it got dry.
All right. Thank you very much. Yours, Kyle. Oh gosh, it's a tomato.
Oh, go figure.
This is from Gearing. We only used one of his pictures, but it's a Laroma 3 showing these sort of symptoms, and the top was curled. He's got other varieties of tomatoes. They're not showing any symptoms of virus, drift, or fungal disease. What do we think about the Roma here?
Well, so one of the other pictures that we saw, and as I zoomed in on this one as well and kind of looked at some of those yellow leaf spots on there, I could see some concentric rings that were forming on there. And that is one of our dead-on diagnostic features for early blight of tomatoes. It's caused by a couple different species of Alternaria. Romas, and especially some of our heirloom varieties, they're going to be much more susceptible to some of these fungal diseases, such as early blight. So again, look for a resistant variety if you can, and then do some pruning to increase airflow through the canopy. Also, as you're seeing some of those infected leaves towards the base of the plant, go ahead and just pluck them off. The more you can remove, the less inoculum we have for that fungus to work its way up the plant. But in some cases, we also will need, we may want to consider a fungicide application. One of our broad spectrum fungicides, such as chlorothalonil or daconil, should work to control this as well, or copper works too.
All right, thank you, Kyle. This is a Levista viewer for your next one. They have a tree form hydrangea and showing some spotting and some leaf spots. They want to know, can this be corrected and not happen again?
Probably not. And so unfortunately I think this could be one of two things. This could be a Cercospora leaf spot, which is very common on hydrangeas. But I think this is the same thing that's showing up on my bush or shrub hydrangea at home, and which is bacterial leaf spot. The warm, humid conditions that we've had have been ideal for a lot of our bacterial diseases. Generally, they do form those relatively small leaf spots. Nothing that you can do as far as a chemical control or anything like that. But again, pruning to increase airflow. The sooner that we can dry off those leaves, the less likely they are to become infected.
All right, thank you very much. And your final one this is from Southeast Seward County, Hollyhock rust.
Beautiful.
And they've been spraying it with copper with no results. Is it just, what do we do here?
Yeah, so Hollyhock rust it's a pretty cool rust. Actually, most of our rusts have an alternate host. And so like when we talk about cedar apple rust, they overwinter on the cedars, and then in the spring they blow onto our apple trees. With hollyhock rust, this one only survives on the hollyhocks. So it does not have that alternate host. So we don't have to worry about removing any other plants in the area. As with most of our rusts, once we start to see those pustules form, it's really too late for a lot of control. However, you can slow it down with some fungicides, some of our broad spectrum fungicides. Again, mancozeb works well on rust. Unfortunately, copper products tend not to work that well on rust, especially hollyhock rust. Now, you can look for a sulfur product as something that would be a little bit more green. But once we have this severe of symptom, it's going to be pretty difficult to get it under control. So I would just kind of enjoy the bright orange spots on your hollyhock now and pretend they're flowers.
All right. Thank you, Kyle. Sarah, this is your first couple pictures here. They cut down an aspen about 4 months ago, and of course it's suckered all over. How do they eliminate them?
Well, actually, you're in a better situation since you've removed the actual tree, and you don't have to worry about not killing the parent tree. In this case, you could go after this with a broadleaf herbicide, like a triclopyr or a carfentrazone or quinclorac or something along that line, and treat it like you would any other broadleaf weed that you have in the landscape. Okay. Now, the other question that we get from people quite often is suckers that are still attached to a main plant that they have in their landscape. You cannot spray those suckers with any of the products I just mentioned because you could do significant damage to the parent tree itself. In that situation, you pretty much just have to continue to prune the suckers out. You can possibly use a contact herbicide like a glufosinate, a phenol, something along that line, and that just burns the foliage back that it comes in contact with and does not translocate into the main part of the plant. But that won't stop the suckers. They will continue to regrow, and you'll just have to keep either cutting them or spraying them with that contact herbicide.
All right. Your second one here is the 3 apple trees in Unadilla. 10 years old, they had 5 inches of rain, and oh dear, what happened? And of course, they're wondering whether they can stake this guy back up, or do they get to start over?
So some of the dwarfing rootstocks that are used on our fruit trees are not what we would call really vigorous. They don't develop as strong of a root system as you would find on, say, a standard tree, and so they can be rather unstable in the soil like this. Those trees, typically what we would recommend is that you would stake them and you'd have them staked for their whole life to provide that extra support to the root system. If the tree is not wilting and it looks like it's still growing and it's fairly healthy, you could pull these trees back up into position and anchor them to the ground and leave them that way for the rest of their life, however long that may be. If they're 5 years old, if they live to be 20, that's a good long life for an apple tree. If the trees, they'll start to wilt and you start to see branch dieback, then there probably was too much damage to the root system at the initial storm, and it may be better to go ahead and take them down and then just have some apple wood to put in your smoker.
All right, thanks, Sarah. And your final one here, this is North Platte. She had a Serene Beauty Japanese maple. It pushed out one little tiny horizontal shoot. She's wondering if she should even attempt to try to tie this up and turn it into a tree, wire it. She's in North Platte.
I would say no. In fact, I would really not even recommend that you replant with a Japanese maple in North Platte, because the chances that this is going to survive for any length of time to be a good ornamental plant in your landscape is fairly negligible, unless you have just the most winter protected location and you provide some extra winter protection for it. It just isn't going to do well. You know, another option would be a Miyabi maple or a Shantung maple. They don't have the leaves as finely cut as Japanese maple, and they will get to be taller. You know, they'll be more in the 20 to 40 foot height range, somewhere in there. But they're much more winter adapted to Nebraska than Japanese maple is. So I don't think that tree is going to last long. I would probably just get rid of it.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, we love growing vegetables and herbs in our garden, but a large part of what's out there is also ornamentals and flowers. Our flowers are putting on a show right now, so let's hear more about it from Terry James out at the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, we are again making sure that we are walking through our garden every day, looking for insects, looking for those squash bug eggs, looking for the Japanese beetles. We have several buckets across our garden with some soapy water. So when we catch them, we're putting them in that soapy water so they can have a spa day in that soapy water. We're also really enjoying a lot of the flowers that are just coming into bloom. So a lot of plants are really looking fantastic. We had about 2.5 inches of rain over about a week period here in Lincoln, so that rain has really helped us. Haven't needed a lot of supplemental water this week, but according to the forecast, we're gonna have to probably start adding that supplemental water. So stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden and check it out.
Right now, of course, it is time for the lightning round. All right, Sarah, ready?
I'm ready.
This is a viewer in Omaha who wants to know whether they can dig their bulbs now and store them because the foliage is totally dead.
Yes, you could do that.
All right. We have a viewer who wants to know whether Whitney crabapple is still available, and if so, any idea where we could find it?
Boy, I'm not familiar with that name, so I'm sorry about that. I would just Google it and see if you can find it through a mail order company.
All right. This is a Taylor, Nebraska viewer who wants to know what will get rid of brome in the flower beds without hurting the flowers.
Well, you could try grass be gone, which is, grass be gone would be an option. You'll probably have to do a few applications because brome is a pretty aggressive grass, so I would not expect to kill anywhere near 100% with one application.
All right. This is an Aurora viewer who wants broccoli for a fall crop and wants to know when to start the seeds.
So if you're going to start the seeds inside, that's what I would recommend, because it'll be too hot outside and the broccoli seedlings may not perform well. But start them inside toward the end of July, early August.
All right. York, hail damaged plants, remove that tattered foliage or not?
In my mind, it kind of depends a little bit on what sort of plant it is. If it's a tree or a woody plant that has some tattered foliage, just leave it. If it's a hosta that's just shredded, you could go ahead and cut it down and let it grow back again. But so I think it depends a little bit on the plant.
All right. Nice job, Sarah. All right. Kyle, ready?
Ready and raring.
This is a Blair viewer who says spruce in his shelter belt are dying from the top a little bit, and he's wondering what might be the cause of that. And what to do about
Most likely Cytospora canker, often kills plants from the top down. I would look for some white pitch going down the bark.
All right. This is a Grand Island viewer who wants to know when Phytophthora shows up in grapes and is it controllable?
It is controllable. It will show up anytime there's adequate moisture. So anytime that soil is saturated, it will be there. So you really want to be on top of it with a fungicide program.
All right. We had a viewer last week who saw the Aster Yellows sample from Eagle, but really does not know what to do. What do we do?
Prune at ground level.
All right. This is somebody who wants to know, what is a bolete and is it edible?
A bolete is a type of mushroom. Some are edible, some aren't. So don't eat them unless you know 100% what it is.
All right. Overnight, pale patches in the turf. It's fescue. Is it a time to treat or let it be?
If it showed up overnight, disease tends not to go that quickly. However, we are seeing a lot of disease pressure in our turf right now. So if it is dollar spot or brown patch, you would want to do a treatment.
All right, excellent. Ready, Dennis?
Yeah.
You have a Gehring question. This viewer says, hasn't seen this many garter snakes in 25 years. What gives?
Some people have all the luck. It just was a good year. It was a mild, probably spring, and yep.
Okay. We had somebody who saw your segment on June 3rd on digging and wants to know where she can buy bat guano for the garden.
I don't know. Find someone who has bats and wants to get rid of it. Otherwise, just Google it, because I don't know.
All right. This is a Council Bluffs viewer who also heard that segment, thought caffeine repels amphibians, but does it also repel snakes?
Caffeine will not repel reptiles, and it will kill amphibians.
All right. So got
doesn't
that
repel 'em,
backwards.
It kills them.
All right, this is a Seward viewer who wonders vegetable oil with red pepper sauce or red pepper flakes for the squirrels eating his garage.
Either one.
Okay, Dunlap, Iowa viewer has bats in the machine shed roof and in the door slides. How to get rid of that?
Well, exclude them with steel wool.
All right, excellent, nice job all. Okay, Sarah, plants of the week.
So what about sriracha, Dennis? Would sriracha keep the squirrels away?
It depends on the squirrel.
Well, Kim put together a really pretty arrangement for us to hear, reminiscent of 4th of July. So we have our fireworks, and then we've got our red, white, and blue going together. So our big firework seed head here in the middle is one of the large alliums, one of the large flowering alliums. I think they said this was Allium giganteum. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So obviously it bloomed probably 2.5 weeks ago, and so now we've got this beautiful seed head. But these can be ornamental in the landscape too. So if you want to leave them and not cut them down immediately, you can enjoy those as well. Then we have down here our red, in our red, white, and blue is a Champlain rose, and so that's a pretty little kind of a heritage rose that is a great addition to a landscape. Then we have here our blue or purple is a vervain, which is a perennial, a beautiful, they get to be about 2.5 feet tall with these beautiful purple flower spikes. And then the white flowers are mountain mint. Almost looks a little bit like a yarrow flower, but this is mountain mint. So
on that note, nobody blow your fingers off, please.
That's right. Let's be safe on 4th of July.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, Dennis. These photos, you have 2 photos. One is of the creature, and then she found a hole. So the hole opposite the chicken shed, 30 yards from a pond that has muskrats, didn't see anything. What makes the hole? But here's the animal that killed a large male guinea and a large rooster.
Yep.
What?
It's hard. It's either a mink or a weasel. And as long as it is, and it looks kind of light, it's hard to tell there's any scale. So they're in the same family. But it looks pretty good size, so it might be, but the hole was small, so I'm going with weasel.
All right, and so it'll come back and kill more chickens?
Yeah, they're very voracious.
Okay, all right. Good to know or not, I guess. All right, then your next one here, this is Murdoch, Nebraska. This is around a 2-year-old little oak, 10 inches deep. So what do we think is doing
Well,
that?
since it looks, I don't see really a groove from an animal, and it's very granular. So just looking at this one picture, I'm thinking maybe it could be a cicada wasp.
10 inches deep. Really?
10 inches, yeah.
Wow.
If that's all it goes,
Okay.
yeah.
All right, then we have 2 from a La Vista viewer, just discovered this hole in the backyard and wondered what exciting thing is living with them.
Okay, so it looks like a vole or a mole, and then something went after it. But because of the tunnels, I'd rather go with the mole. And something could be a fox, love to eat moles, so it looks like something like a canid went after the moles.
All right, excellent. Nature's wondrous
Yep.
method.
Has
Okay.
to be.
All right, Kyle, this is a Lincoln viewer that has this spongy rot at the base of the flowering pear. What do we do here?
refer to the segment with John Fetch a little bit earlier. So spongy wood growth, or spongy wood, can be caused by a few different wood rots. I kind of wonder about armillaria. Armillaria often is white, and you will even see some mushrooms at the base of this tree. I would be very careful with this one, and anytime we're seeing this much wood decay at the base, chances are the tree isn't that much longer for this life. So I would start thinking about a replacement.
Excellent. This is a Riverton, Iowa viewer for your next two. It's a pin oak with good drainage, but then I think our second picture here shows this has been going on for a couple of years with this at the base.
Yeah, and so this is most likely slime flux, also known as wetwood. Wetwood is basically there's fungi and bacteria that will build up inside of the plant. And as they build up, that pressure eventually just kind of forces the slime out through a wound. Most likely it was kind of white and probably foamy when it first came out, but as it dries, we can have some colors that show up. So I wouldn't worry a whole lot about it. I've actually been seeing quite a few pictures of wetwood these past couple of weeks. Just something mostly normal, but again, if the tree is leafing out late, dropping leaves early, could be a sign of something more serious going on.
All right, Kyle, and your last one here is, this is currants, and you can just barely see the dead to the left there. Laden with berries, and then these branches die and shrivel. He's looked down at the base of these branches, and can't find anything. He's confident it's not spraying. The currants have been there for 40 years. I guess I don't know exactly how long currants live, but 40 years is a long time. So I think we are kind of nearing the end of this plant's life. Well, I would just go and prune out those dead branches. If they've died previous years, they will continue to do so. So prune them out, and maybe start thinking about something else in there. Maybe a brand new currant. All right.
Currant.
Thanks, Kyle. All right, Sarah, this is they're located in north central Nebraska, Vanderwolf pine. And you've got 3 pictures here. Problem started last year with the leader and upper branches. She tied a new leader, sprayed with copper fungicide, seems to help, but now it's worse than ever.
Yeah, I don't think this is a disease issue. I think that this is a systemic problem, probably related to the roots and establishment of this tree. In that initial picture, we weren't really seeing a good root flare at the base of that trunk, and you should see that even in conifers, which indicates to me that potentially this tree is planted too deep, which has a huge impact actually on the vigor and health of a tree over the course of its life. So if the tree is planted too deep, you could see it dying back in a few years period after it goes in the ground. The other thing that strikes me is I was wondering about watering issues. Vanderwolf pine is a limber pine, and limber pines are more native to western Nebraska, southwestern United States. So they're more native to drier climates. And so if this plant is too deep and it's getting overwatered, that could easily cause it to die back like this. So I know in some of the pictures you could see some green needles on this tree, but I don't really think this tree is going to be around much longer either, Kyle, like the Bradford pear. I think this one is on its way out. So when you take this tree out, I would really do a close inspection of that root system to see, first of all, how deep was it in the soil? Where was the original, the first big roots coming off that trunk, where were they located? And whether or not those roots were spread out, or if they're still in a tight root ball from this tree being in a container at some point in its life cycle. Any of those things could have killed it.
All right, thank you, Sarah. All right, this one is from Bertrand, wondering what to do with these forsythias. What should they do now?
Yeah, so some pretty significant winter kill on this. The thing about forsythias is they're such a vigorous plant. What I would do with this is I would start by pruning out the dead tips of the branches. Then once I could get in toward the center of the plant more, I would start a 3-year pruning program on this plant where I'm taking out 1/3 of the thickest stems all the way to the ground. And you do that over the course of 3 years, and you totally rejuvenate this plant. And you also thin out the center of that dense shrub, which will make it healthier, and it'll make it prettier too.
All right, and your final one is an elkhorn viewer. She sent a picture of the whole shrub, but it was a little blurry. She trimmed it a few years ago. Looks like the new growth then shrivels. She wants to know what to do here.
So I had a couple thoughts about this. I had a neighbor who had really significant winter injury on a burning bush. And some of the new growth looks just like this on some of those partially damaged stems. So this could be winter injury. It could also be herbicide drift, because if you look really closely at some of those leaves in that picture, the petioles were twisted, the leaves themselves were curled and twisted. So it could be either of those things. You could either prune out the branches that are affected, or you could just wait and see if at some point in the season they start to develop leaves and growth that look more normal. So there's two options here. I don't know if this is going to kill the plant or not. It may be that you're just going to have a little bit of deformed foliage for this year.
All right, thank you, Sarah. Well, a sure sign of summer are wasps that are busy making a nest in the corners of our windowsills or on the porches. They may look a little scary and they could turn into a potential problem, but Jody Green says they do serve a purpose in nature.
If you've been out and about this spring and summer, you will see that there are a lot of wasps flying around. Now, many of them are not going to bother us in the landscape, but we do have a few which are called social wasps that you may be seeing, and there may be reason to be afraid of them. Paper wasps are a type of social wasp that build nests in protective places, but very close to humans. And so we're going to look at a couple nests today and talk about what we can do to manage wasps, how to avoid them, and if we should even be worried about them. So paper wasps have a one-tier nest structure. So these are going to be visible sometimes because they are usually under protected areas around doors and windows, very close to where we live, sometimes under decks, even in birdhouses and playground equipment. So these are the places you should scout early in the season. Paper wasps are active April to October, but in April, the overwintering females that are fertilized are looking for a place to nest. You may see them flying around, and that's the time to hit them with a fly swatter so they don't build the nests there. Though they don't reuse old nests, you want to keep an eye on those locations that you've had nests previously, because it's all about location, location, location. If they feel safe there, a new wasp will end up building a nest in that same location the following year. When the nests are small, you can easily scrape those down. As the season progresses, the wasp nests will grow in number, and their workers will all look very similar, but they have the capability of stinging and stinging repeatedly. The only time they will get very defensive of that nest is if you are close by or they feel they're in danger. So that's why it's important to find those nests and take care of it. Paper wasps have one-tier nests that have open cells, and each one of those cells will have an egg and a larvae developing. They will feed the larvae caterpillars and other pests that feed on plants. So essentially they are beneficial insects because they're natural predators. Adults will feed on flowers, and so you may see them in the garden, which doesn't necessarily mean there's a nest nearby. So scouting is always important. A way to manage nests, if they're in a high density area that you do not want the potential for any stinging, then you'll want to scout the nest during the day, but treat at night. At night, when all the wasps are at the nest, is when you want to treat. Do it in the dark, but use a headlamp or a red cellophane over a flashlight, because the wasps can't see red, and it will be ultimately safer for you. Wear protective clothing, and you can use soapy water solution, or you can use any of the commercial wasp sprays. It is important to do this and maintain safety for all humans. If you have a paper wasp that's in an area that is too dangerous to treat or high up, you may be able to leave them alone if it poses no threat to any humans. Paper wasps are pollinators as adults, and they do some free pest control for us. There are only a small portion of wasps that are actually dangerous to humans, so if you don't need to kill them, then let them live and enjoy the wondrous world of wasps.
And of course, if they are in an area where you are trying to enjoy the outdoors, you will have to find a way to manage them. But as Jody said, they do pollinate our plants, so if they are not bothering you, don't bother them. All right. Dennis, 1, 2, 3 on what scat is that? The first one here. Last time we've had this. What do we think this is? Is this coyote? Is this?
No, it's either opossum or some kind of avian. The way it's built, but I don't see any white, so I'm going to go with opossum without dissecting it out.
All right. Your second one, I believe, is similar picture of some scat in the exact same.
Yeah, the way the corn is in there, it's almost raccoon.
All right, so raccoonish. And your final one is that one, which
and it has a lot of hair in it. Mm-hmm. It's kind of ropey-like. Mm-hmm. So when it's ropey and a lot of hair in it, it's leaning towards a feline. It could be a bobcat.
Oh my.
Or a coyote.
And that's in central Omaha. Okay. A bobcat.
Or it could be the cat next door.
That's a big cat. All right, Kyle. This is an Eastridge viewer. Took out a huge silver maple. Lots of shrooms breaking down the roots, but thought this was way cool.
It really is. This is a Ganoderma. It's one of our very common polypores that grows off of trees. We typically don't see other plants growing through them, but yeah, it's a Ganoderma.
All right. Your next one comes to us from Scotts Bluff. She's sending a picture just to find out what these are.
Yeah, so it has this nice burgundy color. We pathologists typically aren't that exciting of namers. This is a wine cap mushroom, Stopharia rusolata, russo-annulata. Sorry about that. Very common, especially when you buy bagged mulch, things like that.
And don't eat it.
Don't eat it.
All right, and your third one here is showed up in her flower pot. Feels like marshmallows on baked sweet potatoes. Not sticky, not wet.
Oh, so I guess probably not marshmallows then. This could be a slime mold, or it could just be one of any number of saprophytic fungi that show up in moist potting soil. Not causing any harm to the plant. You can scrape it off if you would like. Otherwise, just kind of let that soil dry out a little bit, and you should not have this problem in the future.
All right, Sarah, we have 1, 2, 3 quick ID. The first here is this is in Lincoln. What do we have here?
This is a species of Star of Bethlehem. Not maybe the most common of the species, but that's what it is. They grow from bulbs. They can be weeds, so if it's a problem, just dig the bulbs out.
All right. Your next one comes to us from Niobrara. She is new to the state. She found this singular plant growing right by the front window.
Yeah, this is common mullein. And verbascum is the genus name for this. You'll see these in the pastures and on the roadsides all throughout Nebraska. A little bit later in the season, you're going to have a yellow flower spike there at the top.
All right, and your final one is this neighbor has it running along his fence. He loves it, and we're supposed to tell him it isn't a weed.
Well, it's one of those ornamentals that can be very aggressive and can really get out of hand. This is Persicaria virginiana. Painter's brush is probably the cultivar name of this one. It does have a rhizomatous root system, so that's what it is, Persicaria.
All right.